be able to say that theory has a little bit more validity, and it sort of makes sense. And it also sort of relates to boats. And it's kind of like the way that I've been describing it is that we're standing in our data sets looking out at a horizon. And unfortunately, a storm is coming. And as the storm comes, it has the effect of moving our attention away from the horizon, which is a degree of arc away from us, right up to the beach in front of us, because it brings up the waves from these nice, gentle, placid things, which we can look at way far away, to the big, angry waves that are demanding our attention by being right in front of our face and taller than we are. Does that sort of make sense as a description?
It does, yes.
It does.
Okay, if that description were valid, and there is some mathematical reason to think that that is the case, and we'll know more the next interpretation we get into, and theoretically the more the next interpretation after that, then what we're actually looking at is huge amounts of froth as a result of an emotional storm, and that should we be able to part that froth, we would still be able to see that, yes, the horizon still exists and there's still waves out there. Now, I don't know that for a certainty either way at the moment, but there's some reason to suggest that that is indeed what's going on. And again, it brings us back to the whole boat thing, which I could go on for hours and hours and hours, but my point of bringing it up was to suggest to people that a personal level of small boating activity, and I'm talking the 25-footers less up to the 40-footers perhaps, to the, boats that a person could build in their lifetime and take out, that there's a lot in our data that suggests, especially in the Gulf area, for all those people that are listening, that the people that down there, those poor benighted souls that are out, in the middle of hot summer working on a boat in their backyard, these are the guys to pay attention to, because they're going to basically be local community leaders. And it sort of makes sense at a very practical, fundamental level. And that is, those people that are out building boats are some of the most skilled individuals around in a very diverse way, because they've got to be able to handle all of the different kinds of materials to produce basically a habitat, and a habitat that is a compromise from the very beginning. So again, it means that the small boating community is used to effective, practical compromise daily to solve problems. And they don't usually, as a rule, you don't find the small boaters wasting their times as politicians, and nor would they approach politics quite the same way as the politicians that we've got. And so the kind of society that will arise from them will have at its core a value structure that will persist for generations, that the same way that the value structure that is at the underlying core of the Japanese society persists from the Meiji era and the relationship of the populace to the farmer. Long way, and it's probably lost on most people, but you'd have to know the Japanese and how they revere the farming tradition, even if they might be young and stupid and diss it at the moment. In the bravado of youth, the longer formation of that relationship is so key to their national identity, and that's what our data is suggesting is going to be the outcome for the United States. In fact, the data is quite clear that the cowboy myth will die away, and that the new myth, I don't know what it'll be labeled, of these scavenger guys out in their little boats will take its place.
Wow. Unc, you had a question?
Yes, thanks, Jules. Cliff, this is Zucky Bubby.
Sure, yeah.
To a non-boathead, that's the play on words for the folks in the forum, botheads that they are. That was kind of
stuff like that. I'm just a sucker for crap like that. Go ahead.
Glad you liked that. Now I've got to find my question again. I am so sorry.
Oh, that's all right. Sorry. Oh, the non-boatheads, yeah.
Yeah, okay. To a non-boathead, is there any advice to someone unfamiliar to boating at sea you could recommend, i.e. boating purchasing or anything to help get by till dry land is found for the landlubber?
Well, see, that's the whole point. There's no reason to take to the boats and go out to the sea except the idea that there was going to be a crustal shift. And I've eliminated that possibility in my own mind based on the evidence and the expansion of the planet theory, and especially the most recent developments in Mexico and in South America, because they just fell perfectly in line with what we should expect. So I don't expect that the vast majority of the people will have to relocate. Now, it is true that I expect a lot of coastal disruption, and people should consider having to relocate away from the coasts if they're not prepared to deal with what we've got coming. But we've also got other issues arising. Larger planet means we're going to have greater winds at a lower level closer to the ocean. So a lot of the boat stuff we've got now is not appropriate. And no, I don't think people that are... let me put it this way. I'm a great believer. The only belief system I have says to me that the best thing for any human or any life is to be as harmonious as possible with the universe around it. Now, that also means the universe within you. And so I'm a poor bastard. Was driven into boats, and I can't help myself. So I'm afflicted, right? It's a disease, and I can't help myself. But I'm not suggesting that anybody not so pushed by universe should go out there and do that. Universe might very appropriately push somebody to go and be a mountain dweller or a plains dweller, because that's where they should be relative to their vibration and what they need to learn and their karma and so on. But what I'm suggesting, and the reason that I bring it up, and the reason that I don't want to say harp on it, but that I stress the whole boat issue, is not merely to highlight the self-sufficiency and so on, but as a counter to a deliberate agenda on the part of the powers that be to do away with that. And so I think we need to support the poor boat lunatics, because the powers that be don't like them and they don't want them out there. And I think that they may fear the self-sufficiency and the sovereign nature of these individuals and their skill levels. That's just supposition on my part, but there is evidence that they are actively working to suppress this. And thus, the enemy of my enemy kind of thing, is my buddy, and especially since it's, I'm born to it. And I really do want to promote it, and the universe wants me to. So it's like, okay, this all makes sense in the grander scheme of things, too. And in a certain extent, it's like the non-boat guys, there's probably a real good reason you aren't a boat guy and don't follow us. We're crazy. My wife will stand up and acknowledge that any damn day you want. He's crazy. Get him away from the damn boats.
Land guys are kind of crazy too sometimes. So,
well, there you go.
Well, the reason what had brought this up was you were talking about the expansion of the Earth. I'm kind of deviating here, but the water was appearing and coming from the ground, from what I understood that the report was saying, and so there is where I was thinking that the swelling or the flooding was coming from this formation of oceans in the middle of nowhere.
The formation of the basic materials of the hydrogen and all the gases which percolate themselves up through the compression of the planet. That's how we have oil. It starts off as the formation of the energy leaps from the sun. It goes to the middle of our planet, right through all of us, gets captured by the plasma, which is a giant magnetic bubble, and it compresses it and creates matter out of it, which percolates up through all the other matter that's already been laid on top of that bubble. Some of this matter will show up as water. I think that the water levels that Graham Hancock records in his book Underworld, which forced the Hindu population to retreat to what is now modern India in its shape, which is reduced by some 40% more or less from its previously inhabited shape. I think that water actually did come from the planet. There's no evidence at that time that we went through any area of space and got any more micrometeorites that were water-based or any of that sort of thing, and there's a whole lot of evidence that occurred at an expansion period. So, if we were to grant that the expansion theory was correct, and if we were to grant that the water was one of the things that was produced, and that the Sanskrit text that recorded the destruction of the older India and the relocation of the people to the new India, then we got some really good clues there. And some of the things that it tells us is, we don't really have to sweat it. That the water came up, but it didn't come up so fast that this was a tsunami. It didn't come up so fast that this was a giant wave from hell the way that the movies would have you think of it. But it did come up fast enough that the effect was, as was described in many Sanskrit books that you can even go and read today about that period of time, where they record the tide came in. Came in an extra few feet. Came in an extra few feet and didn't go away as much as the last time. Next day when it came in, damn if it didn't come in an extra few more feet. And geez, Mrs. Kodesh over there, her porch is underwater now. 4 days later, Mrs. Kodesh's house is got a foot of water in it, and she's had to relocate into her backyard. And you just keep going on and on and on like that, and over the course of some number of years, you suddenly discover that, geez, what used to be your city is now 30 feet underwater and is still sinking. And so that kind of effect is what we can expect from the flooding relative to the expanding planet. Then we have a historical record of this. I mean, there's the discussion of these people in the Harappan Valley of the northwestern part of India from, we think we can date it from about 13,000 years ago, that discuss basically this. And there's a couple of cities there that were right at the joining, so to speak, of India and Pakistan in that region, where the cities are continually creeping inland, and it's a trend that they, in their own city records, they point out has been going on for over 1,000 years. So there's no reason to suggest to think that trend wasn't, as we see mostly in nature, a huge onrush and then a trailing off that we're still seeing today. So I don't worry about that. The boatheads don't have to worry about fleeing on water and facing their fear of water, or for whatever reason not being a boathead. I'm afraid of flat places. I lived in Kansas and I can't stand that. So, if you can live there, hey, more power to you.
Okay. Well, that kind of alleviated this part because I have a son that's an offshore boat captain in the Gulf of Mexico, and I was thinking that until fuel is gone, if this flooding occurs, but if it's more of a gradual flooding, it wouldn't be such as a tidal wave, such a thing.
Correct.
But until fuel is gone, something like that, will someone in those positions be able to help or rescue people that do get stranded? Because there will probably be some of that going on. Do you see anything like that happening as far as...
Sure. Actually, we have a history of that in our future pop going back to like 2003. And it was really disturbing because it was showing that there was this trend of all of these, basically a water tribe that was going to take over what we now think of as the Gulf states. And that for some reason inland would be more uninhabitable than the coastal region. Why that should be, I don't know. We never really did get that clarified, but the historical record... it may not be pertinent. It may just be that there's more verbiage written about the people living along the coast. And also some of these things that we see, they're going to be a huge source of, like I say, an interaction with the new electrics is going to, they'll be like an adoption point, not an origination point, but just, a practicality, a proving ground for it because they'll need it.
That really sounds, like a good thing, though.
In the end, after all of the crud, I believe so. We got a couple of nasty years, and then some really very hardy and cool people will get up one morning and decide they're just not going to sit still for this stupid problem anymore, and they're going to go on out and solve it, and one thing will lead to another, and you got a whole new nation being built.
This kind of popped in my head, and I forgot about it, but recently I read something about China had something like a 65-foot swell or wave or something like that that flooded a chemical plant. Is there anything? That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. And we've this I believe is a continuation of the trend that we've seen of the mega waves or the freak waves they would call them. The things that supposedly would knock over the Poseidon and create the Poseidon adventure. Those have really increased. That disturbance, though, in China, I actually believe is related to what's going on now in Ecuador, what we're seeing up here in the tides, what we're seeing in some of the bays in Alaska, and I think it's probably a precursor to the crack in the Pacific Plate.
Oh, makes sense.
Because it can be expected that if we think of it this way, that as the pressures in the inner Earth push up, the largest single unobstructed plate we have in the ocean is the Pacific Plate. And we can sort of think of it as like a sheet of metal or something capping a pressure, which is the metal is going to vibrate. And in our case, we're going to see that the material being produced underneath the plate that's ultimately going to lead to it cracking will probably go through several phases where it will push to a peak and deflect the plate.